The angle of the product images can influence a shopper's decision to add to cart. Products angled towards the add to cart button subtly guide the shopper's focus, encouraging engagement and improving conversions. This minor adjustment can have a significant impact on click-through rates and sales. Sellers are encouraged to experiment with their product images to test this strategy effectiveness in driving conversions. So I don't know what kind of numbers this would have, but it's more like a common sense kind of thing. If you're in marketing at all, for example, they talk about, if you want to direct someone's attention, have the person looking at or pointing at what you want to direct your attention to. And it's kind of the same thing here. If you're leading the sellers into the page versus leading the sellers out of the page. And you can tell pretty obviously the top of the page versus the bottom page, it just looks a little awkward, the top one versus the bottom one when you're looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that I think the best way to put this is, you know, I'm not an artistic guy by any means, but I have taken a few art classes in my day, and perspective is, you know, obviously one of those big things when it comes to design and art and everything in general, and how you actually focus someone's eyes on a piece of art for perspective, right? And it changes essentially the entirety of the image. In the top one, the biggest thing to know is that like the perspective that you're looking at on one of them is straight on, right? Which doesn't make sense to then have the box having a perspective off to the left. Whereas, the left to the right, not only is the perspective different where you're looking to the right and then that guides the eyes, but more so, they're both going to the right. And I think that's the bigger aspect that you kind of missed here as well. Rather than just a right to left, it very much was a, you know, everything is going in the same perspective direction as well, which will help immensely when somebody is trying to actually look at something. And so it makes the image as a whole a lot easier, I think, to read.
Yep, for sure. And yeah, I'm trying to look at it without the lines there, but if you just look at the top image compared to the bottom one, your brain struggles a little bit with the top one to figure out exactly where it should go next, versus the bottom one just seems very easy on the eyes and leads you right over to the price and the star rating and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's one of those, if you have to be looking almost like further away, right, to like read right to left, it's going to be a lot more difficult. Whereas, you know, the left to right, or the bottom one, I guess is the best way to put it, is, you know, it gives you that kind of clear defining line as to where you're supposed to be reading, which I kind of like more.
Yeah.
But again, I think in the comments, you can even see, I think some people are saying, you know, they test it first and see which one works. They've seen both work. And, you know, I think that's kind of true. I think it'll depend on products. For something like supplement, I would absolutely agree with this, but it'll also depend on what your product is. But 9 times out of 10, I would say you always want to have, if like you have, think of your product as like a box, right? You always want to have your bottom left corner be the one that is closest in perspective in the image to that corner.
Yep. Yeah, it's subtle things and subtle changes to the images that can help increase your click-through rate, right? Because that's what the image is doing. The main image is all about click-through rate. And so, like you said, you got to test it. There could be a world where the top one outperforms the bottom one, but I think it's quite unlikely that it would. I mean, there's a lot more that goes into it, obviously, than just the flow of the images. The bottom images is just better in general, the coloring and such, and the wording is easier to read and such. So there's a lot more to it than just the angle of your image. But when you're playing with the image, you want to make sure you're thinking about all these different factors and testing to see which ones get the highest conversion rate.
Do a PickFu test, some might even say.
Yes. Now, I do think the bottom image could improve itself by making women's care much larger and easier to read. So the top one I do think wins on women's standing out. You can't really read probiotic, where the bottom one you can, but you can't really read women's care as good on the bottom image versus
Yeah,
the
I'd agree
top
with
one.
that. I mean, in general, I think both these images are the text is a little small on both them. Even if I'm
Yep.
on my phone, I bet that, or even on my desktop, I bet that they're a little small in the image section. They're adding a little too much information
Yeah.
to each of them, which, I'm guessing Renew Life. I'm not a women's probiotic person, but that's a big brand because
Could
of
be.
the fact that they have that be front and center. So people who are typically looking for this product know the product and the brand.
Yeah. Yeah. If that's a big brand, then that's a good observation. If it's not, and even if it is, I would shrink that by at least a quarter, if not a half, so that you can make that woman's care probiotic much bigger. I would at least do it, test it in the image, digitally manipulate it and play with your packaging. That's a good tip out there for anybody as well. Digitally manipulate your packaging. It's a little bit of a gray area, changing the text and updating it, making it bigger, playing with smaller logos and stuff. But Amazon is not cracking down on that at all. And I don't think they will unless you go crazy. I've had
Yeah.
certain images get suppressed because, we're playing around with adding little starbursts and stuff like that. And the bot triggers something in the bot and it doesn't go live or whatever. But as long as you're just playing around, like making your logo smaller and increasing the size of the text and seeing how that works, experiment and play. You're not going to spend thousands of dollars for new packaging before you test it anyways and see what works better.
Yeah, as long as your main image is generally, close to what the actual product is. It doesn't have to be exact, but the one thing you also want to try and avoid is, adding anything on there that either just like isn't true or making it, especially for supplements. I think this is mostly true compared to like other products where, as long as it, generally is in the same vein of the actual product, I don't think you're going to really have many issues ever. The
Yep.
big issue you will run into is like if you're changing colors and you're, straight up just adding text that isn't there, or, random labels or anything. And then obviously in your other images, try and make sure you have the right thing. But overall, I absolutely agree. Make sure you just make it as CTR friendly as possible.
Yep. Absolutely.